Anillee waan ani dubbadhu waan jara kana booddee dubbachuun rakkisaadha. Akka kan argiisaan dubbatanii booddee waan ani dubbadhu waa'ee seenaa miti. Waan ani dubbachuudhaaf fedhe yeroo hundumaa waan ani godhus miti. Garuu seenaa irratti hundeessee waa'ee siyaasaa immoo waan mul'isuudhaaf hin yaada. Garuu siyaasuma irratti hundaa'ee hojii ani hojjedhitu hin ta'in hojii namoonni gara biraan hayyuu kan biraa hojjetan irratti hundaa'ee waa'ee siyaasaa waa tokko dubbadhaa jechuudha. Innis immoo Oromoon iddoo seenaan kenneef sana yoo qabate malee karuma siyaasaa iyyuu bilisa bahuudhaaf hin danda'u. Iddoo seenaan sun kenneef sana yoo qabate malee waan jedhudha. Kana dhagaa kan hin dubbadha. My paper is a reaction to historical assessments of Ethiopian politics in the last 50 years, or in the last century, offered by two extremely insightful scholars. Both underscore that Ethiopia now faces a historical dilemma. The first one is presented by John Markakis in his latest book entitled Ethiopia, The Last Two Frontiers. In the book, he examines the efforts of three Ethiopian regimes to integrate a multicultural empire to a modern nation state. His conclusion is that all three regimes failed because the Abyssinian elite at the center refused to share power in any meaningful way with the periphery. Now, you can say that it's not new, but what is new about Markakis' conclusion is that he identified two peripheries that was not integrated into the empire. The first one is what he calls the highland periphery. The second one is the lowland periphery. The lowland periphery is the geographical periphery. The highland periphery is actually people who were politically excluded. So when he says that the last two frontiers, what he means is for the creation of a nation state, one has to cross those two peripheries. Now, according to Markakis, the incumbent regime, unlike its predecessors, prescribed the right solution to Ethiopia's age-old problem of nation-state building. However, the TPLF quickly returned to the old method of domination from the center and scuttled its implementation. Now, Markakis also says that the opposition that emerged ahead of the 2005 elections is also just as backward-looking as the TPLF is. Now, here is what he says, actually. I have a quotation of... Okay, now, he said that opposition, had it come to power itself too, would have faced the same opposition. In summary, Markakis says, and here is what is Ethiopia's rulers face a genuine dilemma. That was the first dilemma. A genuine dilemma, a choice between two risky alternatives. One would be to cross the political frontier, make a clean break with the past, renounce central hegemony, and accept equitable power sharing with the periphery. Another would be the political downgrading of the Abyssinian core and the loss of the center's prerogative to determine the distribution of national resources. Now, regarding the first alternative, neither the TPLF or its principal opposition is able to cross the political frontiers, or the physical and the political frontiers, to share power with the peripheries without resorting to violence and brute force. The second alternative is obviously not even a choice for them, because giving up on politics would remove them from the distribution of national resources, which is basically why everybody wants the Oromo areas, or the political, why they do not want to cross that political periphery. Now let's turn to the other dilemma that Donald Levin talked about, because that's the second reaction that I am having. Now, he wrote an article, published an article entitled Ethiopia's Dilemma. Now, he identifies 5 missed opportunities, or what he calls structural openings, that were mishandled. And that is 1960, I'll just keep going through that. 1960, the revolution of 1974, the regime change of 1991, the Eritrean War of 1998, and the May 2005 elections. He posits that these opportunities were mishandled and chances were missed for Ethiopia's political modernization. And each time the opportunity is missed, it led to what he calls the valorization of murder and violence as a means to effect political change. Now, for Levine, the dilemma is whether Ethiopians are capable of getting off the ramp of this violent, escalating violence to bring about change. Now, his analysis is really interesting in this area, but I don't have time to go through that. But what he says is that because of Abyssinian cultural commitment to the ethos of masculinity and ambiguity, that he doesn't see any possibility that they will be able to cross the political frontier and renounce violence. That they will always be committed to violence is what he's saying, and that's the dilemma, that there will be no other way of effecting social and political change. Now, my reaction to his dilemma is that despite the bloodshed and violence, the missed opportunities that he identified actually initiated spurts of progress for the Oromo national movement. And I could have shown that all of these 5 missed opportunities actually pushed the Oromo movement at least one step ahead towards where we are right now. Even the federal arrangement, I would argue that the federal arrangement, that the constitution that is underlying it, is that Markakis touts is the right solution to it. My argument in this paper is this, that even though Markakis, a long-time observer of Ethiopian politics, and Levine, an equally insightful observer of Ethiopian politics, the agents of change that they were looking for were the Oromo to bring about change, because of the 2 reasons that I just identified. But before we come to these, because they could become agents of change that they were looking for, the Oromo also need to resolve their own dilemma. There is a dilemma there, and that's what my title is about, an Oromo dilemma. What is that Oromo dilemma? There are 2. The first one is their awkward positioning in the body politic that is now structured on the basis of ethnicity. Here is what it is. The larger nations, the Amhara and the Tigray, are always, or have been, presumed to be the legitimate contenders and holders of power at the center. And we know this, that between the late 19th century and the early 20th centuries, the Amhara dominated that political center. In the last 22 decades, the Tigrayans dominated that political center. The smaller nationalities on the periphery, on the physical periphery, and even in the political periphery, are often assumed to be co-opted to the winner side. Right? The Oromo don't fit this scheme. Why? Because they are the majority, and the majority cannot be co-opted as the smaller nationalities could be. They are also too large to be allowed to contend for power with the larger nations without imposing a specter of utter domination on them. So for the Amhara and for the Tigrayans, keeping the Oromo out of the space of contention for power has always been the goal. It should not come as a surprise when they try to do so, because they themselves cannot cross the political or the physical frontier. This is the problem of the political frontier. That is the dilemma that the Oromo are facing. The smaller nationalities always will side with the winner, and I could cite examples after examples about that. Now, the second dilemma concerns Oromo's positioning vis-a-vis the political center and the periphery itself. Now, in the current situation, the Tigrayans don't project, this is important, the Tigrayans do not present themselves or project themselves as the dominant group. They present themselves as the oppressed group. But that position is, in Ethiopian political structure, the only people that could occupy the center and at the same time claim to be oppressed are the Tigrayans. The Amhara cannot reasonably occupy the periphery because they are not of the periphery. They cannot occupy the periphery and say they are oppressed because they have never been culturally oppressed, at least. The Oromo cannot occupy the center because they are the majority and they scare everybody. Because of their size, they scare the smaller nationalities and the larger nationalities. So keeping them away has been the political strategy that the smaller nationalities and the bigger nations have followed. Now the point about crossing the frontier. If that is the goal, crossing the frontier, until the Oromo themselves resolve their political positioning, that is the question about their own dilemma in the Ethiopian body politic, they will Oromos will continue to occupy the ambiguous limbo of not being the nation that will rule and not being also the smaller nationality that will be co-opted. That is a very ambiguous limbo that the Oromos have. 5? Yeah. 5? Okay. This relates to, and here's my solution. The solution, to me at least, is apparent in the discourse that is already underway among the Oromo, here among the diaspora, and in Ethiopia as well. This relates to the discourse that the Oromo are the ancient, the earliest, and the original inhabitants of the Horn of Africa or the Northeast Africa region. The discourse is really designed to push back on the notion that the Oromo are outsiders, strangers, newcomers. That is what it is meant to do. This is now a prevalent discourse, as I say, everywhere. Now, this claim to be the earliest and the original has a profound political implication that modifies the ploy that has so far been used to keep the Oromo away from the political periphery. But here is the more confounding dilemma. That is, the peripheralization of the Oromo has not been entirely, all the time, the work of the Abyssinians, the Abyssinian elite that the Markakis blames. Oromo nationalists and the dominant discourse about Oromo nationalism have tended, and I'll try to be as careful as I can here, have tended to claim not the center but the periphery. Have tended to claim the periphery as a goal, as a political goal, and even as a people. The discourse has been to always portray ourselves as the periphery, not as the center. Now, if the Oromo have historically been the center, as indigenous people of the region, they have no option but to embrace the political center as well. You cannot claim, say, we have been here all the time, and then we're going to pack up and go. It's just not going to work that way. So let me close by referring to what I'm trying to say in this regard is that claiming the political center is not something that will be given to the Oromo, but if they are presenting themselves as Kushites and as original inhabitants, then they have to be the owners of being a Kushite and present themselves as committed to the democratization of federal government, the respect for human rights. This is what it means to be Oromo. All right, let me close by saying this. Just 1 minute. All right? And going back to what Markakis and Levine talked about, when Markakis talks about crossing the political periphery, what he's really talking about is the democratization that crosses the two boundaries that he identified. The issue here is not that the Oromo can cross both frontiers and democratize Ethiopia and establish a genuine federal structure. Failing to do so, failing to democratize the whole area, that is, whether it's Ethiopia or the Horn of Africa, is a return to the backward looking of the old center. And this is what is the final one. The final one. Here's what he says at the end. Would be a return to a centralized state under center control can only be imposed on the periphery with greater exertion and force than ever. If this were to happen, it would condemn yet another generation of Ethiopians to authoritarian rule and civil strife.